Green beans, potatoes, tomatoes. It is the Thanksgiving weekend version of the Occupy season long podcast. It's Walid. I'm here with Brian. He's in a turkey mood.
Yes,
I'm in the
sir.
turkey mood. It is a great time to be alive.
I'm ready. It's honestly one of the best slates of the year, right? I mean, Thanksgiving, maybe right next to Christmas because, at least for me, it's playoff time, championship week. But it doesn't get, it's pretty close here, too. Playoffs are right around the corner, people making that playoff push, and there's nothing like having a guy go off in that first Thanksgiving game right before you're about to eat. So, yeah, it's a good time of year.
Oh yeah. So let's put a little extra focus on these three games before we jump into just the typical free agent waiver wire pickups, underperforming guys. So the Bears and the Lions in the take a nap at halftime game.
Yeah.
Any folks that are under the radar that might even have cleared waivers that you'd look at?
Yeah, good question. I think probably because of Taylor Gabriel's injury, he's out with a concussion, or likely out with a concussion. Anthony Miller should play a decent amount. And then Javon Wims, if you're in a super deep league, Javon Wims played 90+% of the snaps both games that Taylor Gabriel missed earlier this year. Those would be the guys I would look to if I needed a receiver from this game.
The Bills and the Cowboys in probably the best matchup of the day. You got the Bills as a 6.5 point underdog. Does that make Cole Beasley an interesting candidate for a revenge game narrative? I mean, we've seen him get a little more involved in the offense, maybe not through air yards, but targets the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, only 20% of the air yards for Buffalo, but 22% of the targets he's run a route on every single one of Josh Allen's dropbacks over the last couple of weeks. So in a game where they should be trailing, he hasn't dropped any new music before this game, has he? Right? I haven't
I
seen
don't
any
think he has.
anti-Cowboys music on his channel, so
No, I don't think he's dropped any bars, but we love the revenge game narrative and something very American about Cole Beasley doing it on the Cowboys at 4:30. So, I mean, the game script is a big thing, right? When you look at receivers who are projected to be in games where they're trailing, there seems to be like, in my eyes, a big discrepancy between like PPR and even half point PPR for a guy like Cole Beasley.
yeah.
Um, do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, he's not getting these deep targets downfield. I mean, look at his teammate John Brown, who
Mm.
30% targets, 51% of the air yards. John Brown's having an elite season from a volume standpoint. So he's the guy that's playable in any format, whereas Beasley is closer to the line of scrimmage, much more likely to get you a handful of points in PPR.
Totally. And I mean, Amari Cooper had a goose egg last week. Obviously, the matchup against Gilmore is as tough as it gets in the NFL. But when you look at Dallas's passing game this week, are there? I mean, you got the Gallups and Michael Gallups and the Randall Cobbs of the world. Actually, I don't want to put them in the same sentence. But do you see yourself looking at a guy like Randall Cobb or even Jason Witten as worthy start options?
Yeah, I think Cobb for sure. Witten, I think it's a little thin. Tight end's not as desperate this week as it was,
Hmm.
say, last week in season-long leagues. So I don't think you need to go there for your season-long teams. But Cobb and Gallup both should be started. I think targets will be funneled to them a little more with Tre'Davious White. We don't really look at wide receiver cornerback matchups too much, but it matters at the extremes. And we saw Tre'Davious White shut down a few guys this year, shut down Cortland Sutton just last week. So maybe the Cowboys a little threatened after the Gilmore shutdown of Amari, and they funnel more targets to Gallup and Cobb today or tomorrow.
Saints at the Falcons. I want to talk about Latavius Murray for a second because I drafted him going into the season with the expectation that his upside was like what Mark Ingram had done in the past. And early on, he showed no signs of that. But once Kamara got hurt, Latavius had a few big games, and then it seems like his role, he's just been a little more involved in the offense. And I mean, the Saints are cruising to an NFC South championship, I guess you could call that. And as they get into the later weeks of the year, do you see Latavius Murray's value continue to go up?
I think it will, and especially maybe week 16, maybe this week 13. Week 14 and 15, they have tougher matchups, more competitive matchups with San Francisco and likely Indianapolis. So we've seen the first 5 weeks of the year, Kamara was having a huge role. Murray didn't eclipse 35% of the snaps, only had more than 5 touches in a game once. Whereas the past couple of weeks, he's hit 40% snaps, 10 touches, 7 touches, scored the touchdown last week. They'll likely try to preserve Kamara a little more, I think, but they're still trying to win the division. They're trying to get the first round bye. So they got to do what they got to do, and if the games remain close, I don't see them using Murray. Definitely not as much, obviously, as they did when Kamara was out. But a slight increase like he's had in recent weeks is fine. But I don't know how much that means for your season-long teams.
Right. Well, I will continue keeping my eye on him, especially as we get towards the playoffs. We'll see, but I have a feeling where I just have a feeling that we'll see Latavius get like double-digit carries towards the end of the season. And if you're in a league, trade deadline's coming up, and you need a guy, who can give you some playoff upside for very low cost, Latavius is a guy I target.
Yeah, not to mention he's on most rosters, so he's not in that Tony Pollard, Alexander Madison type handcuff
Right.
role where if Kamara goes down, he's an instant running back one. But if he's out there or if someone can give him away before the trade deadline, then yeah, he's in that same conversation.
Totally, like giving up a wide receiver 4 or 5 for someone like him if you need running back depth. What about the Falcons side of things? I got to eat my words. I was giving my boy Q a lot of shit for starting Russell Gage, and he delivered 10 targets, 8 catches, 76 yards. Since Mohamed Sanu got traded, he's obviously had an uptick in snaps, but are you chasing points from these last 2 weeks? If you're trying to get him in your lineup, and any concern with Julio Jones' injury?
Yeah, so Gage has actually been pretty involved. Since, like you said, Sanu traded, and now with Austin Hooper sidelined the last couple of weeks, he's played more than 50% of the snaps every game. He's averaging 7 targets a game. They're not high value targets in the red zone or downfield, but he's getting work in PPR leagues that can matter, especially if Julio does miss this game. He hasn't practiced yet as of Tuesday. We'll see what happens Wednesday when Atlanta reports. But he's in danger of missing this game. I think he'll play, but if he doesn't, that opens up a ton of targets, obviously. Calvin Ridley gets the biggest boost, then Gage, and then I don't think it matters for season-long leagues, but Christian Blake would play in 3 receiver sets, and he's been pretty heavily involved when he's been on the field. So just a name to keep an eye out for if, God forbid, Julio's shut down.
Yeah, please no. But you're right. And with the Falcons season kind of out of hand, it is a possibility, which makes me sick because I'm gearing up for the playoffs, man. You know me, I play in 2 leagues, one dynasty league. Let's call it a rebuilding year there. But I did clinch a playoff spot in my season-long home league. And now I'm in an unusual position where I'm pretty comfortable and I'm looking ahead more so for week 15 and 16 versus free agents that can necessarily help me this week. And there are folks out there who probably feel good about having the playoffs in hand and are now looking a little more down the line. So as we go through the top free agents this week, let's also talk a little about what we can expect from guys in week 15 and 16.
Yeah, I would love to get your thoughts there. Again, because of Occupy and DFS being my main focus, I don't have a chance to really sit down and plan out my playoffs in the couple of leagues that I plan on making. So I'm hoping to get some advice from you on guys to look at or defenses to target for those weeks. But we can certainly discuss guys to pick up for this week and maybe they have value beyond this week. I would start by saying Rashad Penny could be, I don't know if league winner is a strong term, but Chris Carson fumbled for like the 10th time this past week. He got benched in the second half, only saw 3 touches. Do you think Penny starts this week, gets more carries, or do you think it's more of an even split, or not at all? What do you think?
Oof. How many fumbles is that? 8 on the year?
Yeah, 8 fumbles.
And it's when I look at Chris Carson and I compare him to Rashad Penny, I just see a better running back out of Chris Carson in between the tackles, like, just yards after contact, vision, all those things. But if you keep fumbling the ball sooner or later, you're going to have to face some consequences. And I don't know if this is one that, is just a reflection of last week and won't carry over. But if you're a Carson owner, there's some real concern here. I just don't know. This week is going to be very important to kind of assess the situation. Um, but I still think Carson's a starter. I just wouldn't be surprised if we saw more of a like 60-40 type of split.
Yeah, it's dangerous. They play on Monday night, and in Week 13, playoff push for most teams. Like, it's a scary thought running out of running back that you need points from on Monday night that may or may not be the lead back. So, regardless, the uncertainty and Penny's explosiveness, if you have a free spot or you need a running back, he should be a guy that you pick up.
100%. He probably is already on rosters, given his upside if anything did happen to Carson, who he just looks like an unbreakable running back.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
But
he's in that same group of guys we talked about last week too, like Jonathan Williams. The guys we talked about, if you go back and listen to last week's podcast, if guys on that episode are still available, certainly pick them up. Jonathan Williams, David Njoku at tight end. Some of these stashes we talked about, definitely go back and listen to that if you haven't. These guys that we're talking about now are beyond those guys.
totally. And, even though Penny had 14 carries last week, he only had one target. He hasn't really been used in the passing game this year. And I guess my concern is it's a guy that relies so much on explosive plays that if the volume's not there and, he's not getting double digit carries, he's going to be on your bench.
Right.
But it just seems like Carson's one fumble away from this thing getting ugly.
Yeah, that's the thing though. So week 15, Carolina, one of the worst rush defenses in the league. Week 16, Arizona, one of the worst defenses against fantasy running backs. So some value potentially here if Penny takes a hold of this starting job due to Carson's fumbling issues.
So a lot of DFS players were on full tilt when Benny Snell came in and got the bulk of the work for Jalen Samuels. He's probably a free agent in a lot of leagues. What is he worth making a aggressive bid on waivers for, or is this just like a fluke?
I mean, I think the workload will be there. Connor's injury, it doesn't sound like he'll be back this week.
Mm-hmm.
He sounds like he's taking this slow. Generally, when you re-aggravate an injury, it takes a little bit longer than the initial rehab time, and he was out 2 weeks with that initial shoulder injury. So I think 2 weeks. This will be week 2. He's definitely out this week. I wouldn't be surprised to see him miss next week as well. They play Cleveland this week, Arizona. Snell is getting the bulk of the rushing work. So if you need a running back this week, I think he's worth picking up and starting.
Yeah.
21, 22 touches last week. Samuels is still going to get the passing game work.
Right.
And I don't think Cleveland's going to blow them out to have this be a full Samuels game script.
100%. So it really depends on what your situation is. If you're in a must win and this week is that important to you, then Benny Snell makes a lot of sense. If you're sitting like comfortable and you're thinking, hey, maybe Benny Snell could help me, week 15, week 16, I wouldn't bet on it at all. And I know this is a season long podcast, but an interesting price discrepancy. FanDuel has Benny Snell valued higher than Jalen Samuels, but DraftKings is taking the opposite stance, mainly because of the PPR element. But where do you see these two guys if you are let's say you have both of them, right, and you can only start one for your season long? Does it change with a half point PPR league or full PPR, or do you think Benny Snell's rushing volume is just too good to replicate?
Yeah, I think that volume. I mean, he out touched him 22-5 last week, and even Kareth White out of nowhere got some touches, and that was tilting everyone in the first half. So it's a dangerous situation all around. And if we look at red zone, this is what was interesting to me last week. Benny Snell got 6 opportunities within the opponent's 20-yard line. Jalen Samuels got 0. So I would lean Snell regardless, but again, not you would be pretty desperate, I think, to need a running back here to use him.
Yeah. Let's talk about the fun Chiefs backfield. LaShawn McCoy, we got Darrell Williams. sooner or later, I mean, this offense has to get back on track, right? And I mean, Damian Williams looks like he's okay, but I just like it's just so messy.
It's impossible to find information about Damian Williams. I haven't heard a single news item since that Mexico City game. So
Yeah.
ideally, we'll find out today. We're recording this Wednesday morning.
Mhm.
Chiefs practice this afternoon, so we'll probably find out there. But they did work out Elijah McGuire, running free agent running back, which is a little concerning for Damian's availability. But again, LaShawn McCoy, Darrell Williams, either one of those guys should probably be picked up in the case that Damian's injury lasts this week and beyond.
Yeah. Oh man, it's tough because they're in a good spot, right? 9-point home favorites
Yep.
versus the Raiders, who just got destroyed by the Jets. And if there was only two guys or one guy to worry about, we'd already know. But it is very confusing. So I don't know. I would stay clear of this. I know Trevor, my dentist, and also my good friend. His season's pretty much done, and he blames the Chiefs' backfield. And at one point, I think he actually rostered four running backs from Kansas City.
Man,
So just kind of goes to show what a mess they've been this year.
yeah, I mean, it's been a tough backfield to figure out. Depending on when you drafted, if you drafted early, you were all over Damian, and then once the McCoy trade happened, you were all over McCoy. So I mean, it's just been a nightmare and a headache for owners all around.
Not to mention preseason Darwin Thompson.
Oh
Like it's
God, yeah, Jesus.
a long time ago. The tight end position is a little interesting this week. So Eric Ebron is put on IR. Jack Doyle should see an uptick, but also Mo Alley Cox. I don't know. Like, what do you make of this tight end situation? And is Jack Doyle a guy who has gotten like some of the lowest like air yards you can hope for? Is he going to get an uptick in that and have more upside, or is it like the same role for him?
I think more volume in general. You know, when Ebron's on off the field, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but his target share, his air yard share goes up pretty considerably. And now with Ebron out the last 4 or 5 games of the season, I think Doyle makes for a great pickup. It's not like you have to start him this week, but I think the increase in opportunity makes him one of the better tight ends to pick up because it's been a terrible position all year long anyways. Might as well pick up a guy who should see an increase in opportunity.
So I'm going to throw a name out there that I embarrassingly spent $4
God.
on yesterday. Miles Gaskin of the Miami Dolphins.
I don't think it's that embarrassing, aside from the fact that you're picking up a Dolphins running back. But he actually got 25% of the snaps or so. They're finally fed up with Kalen Balaj and his historically bad 2 yards per carry. Patrick Laird was not the savior that most football Twitter thought he would be last week. So Gaskin's going to get his chance, and I think some reporters talked about this week from Miami saying that there would be a shakeup in the backfield on Sunday and for the rest of the season, see what they have. So I think Gaskin would be that guy.
So I looked ahead. I saw that the Dolphins play the Bengals week 16 and the Giants week 15. And I just, kind of used some deductive logic. So Kalen Balaj has been ass. Like, let's just face it. Whether you're looking at the film, you're looking at the numbers, like, there's no way to justify him having the opportunity that he gets. And the
Right.
fact that him and Kenyon Drake were at one point in like a competition just goes to show the Dolphins were trying to take. Um,
Yeah.
and we get to the end of the season where like, what good is it going to do the Dolphins to run the ball with Kalen Balazs 20 times for 30 yards?
Right.
And that Bengals matchup is prime, and there's a chance Miles Gaskin does nothing, but I'd rather take a shot on him, see how this thing shakes out, and get ahead of it versus wait a week or two down the line when, like, let's say this week he goes out, gets 15 carries for 65 yards and a touch. All of a sudden, he's the number one pickup of the week.
Yep. You're 100% right, and you have the luxury of keeping him on your bench and seeing how the situation shakes out. He has 2-3 weeks to take a hold of the reins in that backfield to take advantage of those matchups, and you already have him on your team because you're looking ahead. You have a playoff spot locked up. You have that luxury of being able to sit someone on your bench.
Exactly. And a couple of, I guess, guys that I've been looking ahead for and looking at the playoff schedule. And some trade. I mean, would you say every league should have their trade deadline by now, or like our trade deadline's this Friday? So, is that standard? How does that fall?
Yeah, it varies from league to league. I have different opinions on it, but I guess in the end, you should be able to trade up until the playoffs. And if you're worried about collusion, you shouldn't be in that league anyways.
Yeah,
So there you go.
yeah. No, I'm with you there. I think if you're in a league with people that are gonna cheat, then you're in the wrong league. So,
Yeah, exactly.
for the non-cheating leagues here, I'm excited about Evan Ingram, assuming they don't flukely shut him down. We know his upside. He plays a position that's super scarce. He's been injured the last few weeks, but he gets the Dolphins and the Skins week 15 and
Mm.
16, assuming he plays. That could be a tilting matchup, and it might be a tight end worth targeting, especially if that owner is upset. Um, I mean, we talked about Sam Darnold, kind of going down the line, but his playoff matchups aren't as friendly. But Baker Mayfield gets the Cardinals week 15. We talked about Njoku, who should be back there. I mean, there's some juicy week 15 matchups when you look at guys that should be available. And if you have the foresight, I'd go out and get them. Anyone that comes to mind for you? Any defenses?
Defense, I think the Jets have a couple of good matchups. They play Miami, I think, next week. Um, this is a stretch, but Kelvin Harmon of the Skins, he finally got significant playing time last week. Turned it into 125 air yards on 6 targets, so an average depth of throw of nearly 21 yards. And they get the Eagles and the Giants in weeks 15 and
Yeah.
16. So assuming they're going to roll out their two rookies, McLaurin and Harmon, for the last few weeks of the season to build rapport with Haskins, uh, Harmon could be one of those guys that you're starting in the championship game, assuming
Yeah.
he shows consistent usage over the next 3 weeks.
Right. And these aren't guys who are saying, hey, jump on it right now. But
Right.
sometimes you got to take a little risk with these pickups versus if you drop a guy like I dropped Raquel Armstead after holding him as a handcuff all year because I'm looking ahead now. I'm going to pick him up as soon as I can put Evan Ingram back on IR.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it's like, hey, look, these guys aren't going to be picked up unless, after the series of games, hopefully if Leonard doesn't get hurt. But
Right.
also looking at the Giants defense, they get the Dolphins week 15 and the Skins week
Mm.
16, and they're just sitting as a free agent pickup. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, you get those two teams. I'd be willing to play any defense against them. So yeah, that's a good call there too. A defensive stash if you have an extra roster spot.
And even if you're not locked in on the playoffs, right? Like, but you have a good chance of getting there. And you can sacrifice one or two bench spots for guys that like backup quarterbacks that you don't unless they have a good playoff matchup, you don't need to hold on to them. It is worth, I think, taking some risk with these bench spots and setting yourself up in the event that you get to the postseason. And now, you're setting yourself up with some good matchups.
Let me ask you this. So a friend of mine, through some miracle, ended up with Russell Wilson and Matt Ryan on his team,
Oof.
and start one quarterback. Is there any reason to hold on to Ryan? Like, should he drop Ryan to pick up stashes for the playoffs? Like, I personally don't see a reason to hold on to both.
No, it's you prove a good point as far as like what's the benefit of holding on to both. But do you know who Matt Ryan's playoff schedule looks like? Let's pull it up.
Yeah, they play New Orleans this week, and then week
Yeah.
14, 15, 16. Carolina would be pretty good. 16 is Jacksonville, also
Mm.
startable. San Francisco in week 15, you probably wouldn't start him there in
No,
San
yeah.
Francisco. So um, I don't know. I just don't think, given the injuries, Atlanta's ineptitude on offense, that you'd be starting Ryan over Wilson in any game.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
No, it's like you're proving the argument that just went against what I just said. Um, um, it is totally logical to let go of a guy like Matt Ryan, but I just feel like there's people with worse backup quarterbacks. So that's an actual like dilemma to have where you're like, okay, Matt Ryan, like he could start one of those weeks that week. Could be very important, and he still has high upside.
Right.
But if your backup quarterback is like, I don't know, like name me a guy like
I don't know, like Brissett.
Jared Goff,
Right.
like Phillip Rivers,
Golf did,
Kyle out, like
Golf did not throw a touchdown in November. He should be off any roster.
period, right? But like some folks, yeah, like if you have a Jimmy G or whatever the case is, like yeah, there's no point unless like you at this point we have week 13, 14, 15, 16. Like you should know these matchups. You should have foresight and know, okay, no way I'm starting this guy these 2 weeks, so they do me
Right.
no service. I don't know if you have enough information on Matt Ryan yet to make that assumption because he could very well be a great start against the Jaguars, and then you end up playing against him because someone else picks him up, and
Right.
then you're on full tilt.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Disaster situation if that happens.
oh man, but still, foresight's good. Look ahead. Don't get too crazy, but shoot them all. I want to see what folks are thinking. So if you have any questions like this, hey, is it worth me dropping this person to pick up that person given playoff context? Let us know. Everything's case by case.
Yeah, either tweet at us at Occupy Fantasy, or if you're watching this on YouTube, watching the video version, just comment below with your thoughts or questions, and we'll definitely answer them and get back to you.
Survivor Pick Sunday. If you're still alive at this point, like you smell the money.
Yeah, or you started a second half Survivor League. Either way,
Right.
I think it's relatively easy this week. Carolina -10 against the Skins, Philly at Miami, Kansas City at home against Oakland. Probably you've already used Kansas City, but lead any preference between Carolina or Philly?
I like Philly. I know the Skins suck, but the Dolphins are just worse, right? And I don't know. Like, there's a 1 point difference for Carolina being 10-point favorites over the Skins compared to the Eagles being 9-point favorites over the Dolphins. But I still like the Eagles. I think they're in a prime bounce back spot. But you can't. I think both will check out here.
I agree. You can't go wrong with either. Hopefully the Eagles start their best quarterback in Josh McCown this week. That would give me more confidence.
Speaking of Eagles' best quarterbacks, Nick Foles, former Eagle,
Crushing the
former
transitions.
Eagles' best quarterback, right? He gets the Buccaneers this week, and Daniel Jones gets the Green Bay Packers. Both pretty serviceable streaming options. Who do you like more?
I would lean towards Daniel Jones, just with his rushing ability, and he throws further downfield. I would think Jones. The Packers have been giving him a ton of yards through the air lately. Jones gets the edge for me. It's not like there's a slam dunk streaming option this week. There aren't really many top 10 options available. So yeah, I don't know how many people are streaming this week, and if you are, it's pretty rough, I think.
Right. Hopefully, you picked up Darnold, right? As
True.
we told you
Or
guys
Mayfield,
before
as we discussed. Yep.
or Mayfield, but I mean, both the guys can in great matchups, but can both bust. I think I like Daniel Jones, given, like you said, the rushing floor that's there, and I mean, the matchup in my eyes is much better for Nick Foles because even as bad as like the Packers D has been as of late, like on paper, their passing defense just seems better to me than
True.
the Bucks, but I still like Daniel Jones because he can run.
I agree.
Streaming defenses, not surprising. We have two of our survivor picks: Eagles versus the Dolphins, who I didn't pick up this week because hey, I'm in the playoffs and I'm not gonna use a defense for this week. Like I'm riding out with the Packers.
It doesn't matter to you, right? Like your matchup doesn't matter
Yeah,
this week, so
it was so hard not to because I saw them on waivers. I still have $11 left over, and I'm just like, man, I know they're going to be the better option this week, but then I just looked at their schedule and I'm like, that doesn't do anything for me down the line.
right.
Um, the Panthers and the Skins, obviously a formidable stream, but then the Chargers versus the Broncos, who have been abysmal,
Yeah, they're talking about shaking up their offensive line, who's already been bad.
terrible.
Yeah, so Melvin Ingram, Joey Bosa versus that offensive line looks pretty good to me. I think Chargers are in a smash spot against the Broncos.
And let's talk about some Twitter questions that we have from our followers.
Yeah, our boy Leon, longtime follower, DMV resident, has 3 questions. So I'm going to ask them to you, Walid. All right, PPR, you got to pick one. Jamison Crowder, A.J. Brown, or Latavius Murray?
That's a tough one, man. That is such a tough one. Um, and he does have Alvin Kamara as well. Oh man, I mean, I think I'm biased, and I still want to say Latavius Murray because I think for some reason this is the type of week where he'll get 10, 15 carries and get in the end zone. He's like the most likely to score out of those three guys, but I think the real answer is going to be Jamison Crowder.
I agree. I think Crowder too. AJ Brown, you want to play him after his big game last week, but I think it's just chasing points at this point.
Exactly. I mean, he delivered in DFS last week, but really all off one huge touchdown catch. Chasing points is never a good formula, and it's not like the Titans, despite Tannehill's success, are going to start airing it out all of a sudden.
Right. Okay. Wentz or Darnold for Leon?
Leon. Man, these are tough, and these are good problems to have, though.
Yeah.
I am going to go with Carson Wentz. Yeah, I'm going to go with Carson Wentz. I'm starting Darnold in my league. You can't go wrong. I think both guys should get you 20-plus points. I don't know. It could go either way. I don't feel strongly about one or the other. I just think both are good plays, and you're in a good spot.
I agree. Edge for Wentz for me, but again, I'm with you. I think both are good options. All right. David Montgomery or James White in PPR?
Whew. David Montgomery. I think he is in a prime spot against the sorry Lions on Thanksgiving. I mean, he's the type of guy, if the game script is favorable, he's going to get a lot of carries. And I just don't think he's had I mean, he's gotten stuffed the last 2 weeks. So, like, no excuses on that end. But I think he's due. And I think this is the game where he gets 20 carries. And James White, PPR, he has that upside. But I don't know. Like, I'm leaning towards Montgomery. James White is probably the safer play. But I think Montgomery gives you more upside.
All right, Crowder, Will Fuller, or if Alshon plays, Alshon Jeffrey. Fuller, now, I think Stephon Gilmore is going to be matched up with DeAndre Hopkins in that Sunday night matchup. So Fuller will have the better cornerback matchup there. Jeffrey gets the Dolphins, and then we already talked about Crowder. So,
yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, Leon, you got some tough things to decide, man. And I don't. Will Fuller makes sense given Hopkins' matchup, but Will Fuller could also get hurt in the first quarter. Like, I don't know. So it depends how, like, if you are very, like, risk averse, I think Crowder is the safest bet. But if you need someone who can get you 20-plus points, then I'd go Will Fuller.
yeah, I like Jeffrey a lot too. We'll see if he's deemed fully healthy. I mean,
That's the thing.
They have
100%.
no other receivers to throw to, so if he's healthy,
Right.
I like him the most. I think.
That 100, yeah, and I mean, to your point, if he's 100% healthy, he hasn't played the last 2 weeks. He also missed 2 weeks earlier in the season, so and he hasn't had a 100-yard game. But
Bam.
given how banged up that receiving core is, and since there are no other options, he makes for a solid play.
Yep. All right, final question from our longtime follower, Double Eagles, Nick. It's first week of the playoffs for him, and he's making a tough decision between Royce Freeman, Naeem Hines, and Jordan Wilkins. Hines saw 30-40% of the snaps last week. Wilkins was benched after playing just one snap and committing a special teams penalty. So to me, it seems like it's between Hines and Freeman. Tough spot, Nick.
Very tough spot. I think I'm gonna go with Hines.
I agree.
Yeah. But hopefully that's not your RB2 and it's your flex.
Yeah, I'll go Hines. He should get more work this week as a pass catcher. Freeman has lost significant snaps and touches to Lindsey over recent weeks. So,
yeah. All right, well, that wraps it up here for us. We'll be back with the DFS podcast. For Brian, this is Walid. Happy Thanksgiving and good luck to you guys. Make sure you put in your waiver claims and start thinking ahead for the postseason.